night's ride home turned into something I never expected: a quiet road, a familiar face, and a conversation that changed the way I see myself. The evening had cooled faster than I planned, leaving the front steps of my sister's house wrapped in a soft blue dusk. I had stayed longer than intended, chatting with family until my cousin's son, Ian, offered to drive me home. I almost said no, feeling a bit self-conscious about accepting help, but the sky was dimming and my joints were stubborn. I thanked him and agreed. The street smelled faintly of pine and cool evening air as we walked to his car. Ian stood by the driver's door, tall, polite, with that easygoing expression he'd had since he was a boy. But now he was a grown man in his late 20s, carrying a calm steadiness I remembered well. I settled into the passenger seat, grateful for the warmth of the heater. As we pulled away, we talked the way relatives do lightly, about work and his new place. His voice filled the car, comfortable and unhurried, and I found myself relaxing. For the first time all week, the road ahead was a ribbon of gold from the streetlights. Every now and then, Ian glanced my way with a thoughtful attentiveness I'd forgotten younger people could have. Somewhere near the old elementary school, he asked how I'd been really doing. It was the kind of sincere question that stops you. I hesitated, unused to someone younger asking something with such weight, but the dashboard lights made everything feel gentler. I told him I'd been feeling the years more than usual, wondering if I'd missed a few turns along the way. My voice was steady but honest. He listened with the kind of presence that gives you room to breathe. As we drove past the lake, the streetlights shimmered on the water like scattered coins. Ian finally spoke, telling me that when he was younger, he always admired how I carried myself, how I seemed strong even on days that weren't easy. I didn't know what to say. Unexpected kindness hits differently when you haven't received it. In a while, an unspoken shift settled over us, not romantic, but a quiet understanding beyond family titles. By the time we pulled into my driveway, I felt lighter. Ian waited a moment before I stepped out, telling me I wasn't alone. Not nearly as much as I thought. The next morning arrived with a thin layer of fog. I sat at the kitchen table, my mind drifting back to the drive. It wasn't just the conversation that lingered. It was the feeling of being seen and understood. Around midday, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Ian. "Hope you got home all right. If you need anything today, let me know." My fingers hovered over the screen before I thanked him. A moment later, another message appeared. "I enjoyed talking with you. Didn't get the chance to say that last night." I exhaled slowly, touched by his sincerity. I told him I enjoyed it too. By late afternoon, I took a walk to clear my head. Halfway down the block, Ian's truck pulled up. "Want a ride home? Looks like rain," he called. I laughed and hopped in just as the first drops tapped the pavement. When I settled in, he asked what I had been thinking about. I glanced at him, surprised by his openness. "Life," I said. "Choices. What comes next?" He nodded, admits that he thinks about those things too more than people realize. It hadn't occurred to me that he might carry his own doubts. We drove past the park, the swings shifting in the wind. Ian slowed the truck. "Last night, when you talked about feeling like you'd missed a few turns," he asked gently, "did you mean you feel stuck or just uncertain?" The depth of the question caught me off guard. Most people avoid topics that personal. I admitted it was a little of both, that looking back can make the present feel thin. Ian absorbed my words. "You're not invisible," he said. "Not to me." The sincerity reached a place inside me that had gone quiet years ago. I turned toward the window, watching rain carve lines down the glass. When I looked back, he was watching me with quiet respect. "Thank you," I whispered. "I don't hear that often." The rain slowed as he drove me home. Neither of us moved at first when we reached the driveway. The space between us felt charged with a meaningful, quiet understanding. Before I stepped out, he told me that if I ever wanted someone to talk to, he was around. As I walked up the driveway, I felt a subtle invitation to rediscover a part of myself I'd long set aside. On Sunday afternoon, Ian stopped by with a paper bag of soup his mother had made. I invited him in, and we settled into the living room. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversations," he began. "They've meant a lot to me." I nodded, telling him I didn't realize how much I needed to talk openly again. He looked relieved. "I wanted to make sure I wasn't overstepping," he said. "I value our talks. They help me feel grounded." "You're not overstepping," I replied. "At this stage of my life, I appreciate sincerity far more than distance." He admitted that talking with me made his own directions and choices feel clearer. We talked for a long while about the pressure of expectations and how life doesn't always unfold as planned. Ian leaned forward. "Do you feel hopeful these days?" he asked. "Are you looking forward even a little?" I thought about our conversations, like small lanterns being lit along a dim path. "Yes," I finally answered. "I feel hopeful because I feel seen again. That gives life a different texture." Ian smiled. He stood after a while, knowing it was time for the evening to settle. At the door, he reminded me he was always there to listen. I watched him go with a deep sense of appreciation. When I stepped back inside, the house felt fuller. The unexpected conversation from that first ride home had become a turning point, a reminder that no matter our age, we can still be surprised by kindness and grow through sincere connection. It wasn't a conclusion. It was a beginning I hadn't known I needed.